You'll be visiting your relatives in a foreign land.
Vivian Vance, known to the world as the beloved Ethel Mertz on I Love Lucy, was a woman whose life behind the cameras was far more complicated than audiences could ever imagine. Born Vivian Roberta Jones in 1909 in Cherry, Kansas, she grew up in a strict household where her love for acting, singing, and dancing was not encouraged. Her family valued discipline, religious devotion, and conventional paths for young women, and anything outside of that was often frowned upon. From a young age, Vivian learned that showing her talents openly could bring disapproval rather than praise. This early suppression of her creativity left lasting marks on her confidence and shaped how she viewed herself. She often hid her abilities, questioned her instincts, and doubted her worth. Even as she grew older and began to pursue acting, these childhood lessons haunted her, creating a pattern of holding back and overthinking her every move. Despite this, she was determined to follow her dreams. She longed for freedom, for the chance to fully express herself, and she believed in the power of performance to connect with people. When Vivian moved to New York City as a young woman, she reinvented herself, changing her name to Vivian Vance and immersing herself in the vibrant world of theater. New York offered opportunities she could never have imagined growing up in Kansas. She studied acting seriously, worked tirelessly, and built a reputation as a disciplined and talented performer. By the 1930s and 1940s, she was a respected Broadway actress known for her strong singing voice, sharp comedic timing, and emotional depth. Directors and fellow actors admired her ability to fully inhabit a character while remaining professional, focused, and prepared. Offstage, however, she was far from the frumpy, awkward image she would later be required to portray on television. She was attractive, stylish, witty, and deeply emotional. She had the ability to command attention, yet she also carried insecurities rooted in her past, reinforced by the need to constantly prove herself in a competitive industry. Even as her Broadway career flourished, she often wondered if she truly deserved the praise she received, and she frequently measured herself against the standards of others rather than her own talents. Then came the opportunity that would change her life: the role of Ethel Mertz in I Love Lucy. Television in the early 1950s was a new and powerful medium, and casting directors had strict ideas about what roles should look like. Lucy Ricardo, played by Lucille Ball, needed a sidekick, someone to play a supporting role that would complement her energy, highlight her comedic brilliance, and never overshadow her. The network and producers had a clear vision of Ethel Mertz as older, heavier, and less glamorous than Lucy. This posed a problem for Vivian, whose beauty, stage presence, and charisma made her an unconventional choice for the role. Studio executives feared that she would distract audiences from Lucy, and at first, many were resistant to casting her. They worried that a talented, attractive woman like Vivian could unintentionally draw focus away from the main star. Lucille Ball, however, immediately recognized Vivian's unique abilities. She saw an instinctive comic timing, an emotional depth, and a natural responsiveness that made Vivian the perfect partner on screen. Lucy understood that great comedy relied on trust and collaboration, and she fought to have Vivian cast, despite studio resistance. From the very beginning, Vivian accepted that her role came with limits. She would need to stay in the background, supporting the jokes, and never pulling focus from Lucy. For a seasoned Broadway actress, this was a difficult adjustment. She understood the value of the opportunity, but she also felt the pressure of being cast permanently as number two. Once filming began, the reality of the unspoken rules became impossible to ignore. Wardrobe, makeup, and stage direction were all carefully controlled to ensure that Ethel looked ordinary and never drew attention. Loose dresses, shapeless skirts, flat hairstyles, and padded costumes were standard. Even her posture and gestures were guided to appear awkward or less polished. Every detail reinforced the expectation that Ethel must stay in the background. The jokes about Ethel's weight and appearance, though intended to be funny, often hit painfully close to home. Behind the scenes, Vivian sometimes cried in her dressing room, frustrated by the way her natural presence was suppressed, but she rarely complained publicly. She maintained professionalism, understanding that actresses who resisted the system could be labeled difficult and jeopardize their careers. Despite these challenges, she brought warmth, intelligence, and nuance to every scene, elevating Ethel beyond a flat comedic archetype. Vivian also faced challenges with her on-screen husband, William Frawley. Their personalities and working styles clashed from the start. Vivian, disciplined and methodical from her theater background, was frustrated by Frawley's casual approach, late arrivals, and reliance on instinct rather than preparation. A single comment about their age difference early in rehearsals offended Frawley deeply, planting a seed of tension that lasted for the entire run of the show. Off-camera, they avoided each other, spoke only when necessary, and refused to socialize together. Yet, ironically, this tension translated into a believable and dynamic on-screen relationship. Their bickering and teasing looked authentic, and audiences loved the energy between Fred and Ethel. Meanwhile, Vivian's relationship with Lucille Ball was equally complex. Lucy admired Vivian's talent and timing, while Vivian respected Lucy's discipline and instincts, but there was an undeniable power imbalance. Lucy was a major star and executive producer, controlling scripts, casting, and major decisions. Vivian depended on the show for stability and exposure, which meant navigating their friendship carefully. Over time, however, shared experiences, mutual respect, and the stresses of life off-camera brought them closer. They confided in each other, supported one another, and gradually formed a bond built on survival, loyalty, and understanding rather than comfort. Despite the pressures, I Love Lucy became a monumental success, and Vivian Vance's portrayal of Ethel Mertz was a key part of its enduring charm. Her timing, reactions, and ability to enhance Lucy's comedy without stealing the spotlight made her an indispensable member of the cast. Audiences adored her character, often noting her beauty and style in real life contrasted sharply with the frumpy, awkward image on television. Yet with every laugh came a personal cost. Vivian felt the weight of being permanently cast as a secondary character. Casting directors, writers, and producers could no longer see past the role, and offers she received after the show were often limited to similar, funny neighbor or supportive friend parts. Her range as a Broadway-trained actress, capable of dramatic depth and musical performance, was largely ignored. This typecasting was frustrating and hurtful, but Vivian chose to stay with television, recognizing that it provided stability, exposure, and financial security in an unpredictable industry. She believed in doing her work well, even when it came with personal sacrifice. Beyond professional limitations, Vivian faced emotional and personal struggles. She dealt with depression, self-doubt, and repeated disappointments in relationships. Several of her marriages failed, often because her partners were unable to match her intelligence, independence, or emotional depth. Some felt threatened by her career and public attention, leaving her feeling unseen and undervalued in her personal life. Even while making millions of people laugh every week, she experienced profound loneliness. Fame could not shield her from the quiet struggles of identity, self-worth, and emotional fatigue. Seeking help for mental health challenges was difficult during her time, as societal stigma for women was high. Yet Vivian did pursue therapy at points in her life, understanding that she needed support, even when the world offered little understanding. The success of I Love Lucy also carried its own emotional burdens. The strict rules around appearance, timing, and behavior meant that Vivian had to continually mask her true self. Wardrobe, makeup, and production choices all contributed to a constant reminder that her value was tied to supporting someone else's brilliance. Humor came at a cost. Jokes about Ethel's appearance and frumpiness, while hilarious to audiences, often landed painfully close to home. Vivian showed remarkable professionalism in these moments, yet inside, the pressure and emotional toll were significant. Over time, these experiences shaped her view of herself and her career. She knew she was capable of more, but she accepted her role, balancing pride in her work with the quiet frustration of limits imposed by the industry. After I Love Lucy ended in 1957, Vivian hoped for new creative opportunities. Unfortunately, Hollywood largely saw her as Ethel. Casting directors rarely offered roles that showcased her Broadway range, instead funneling her into similar supporting characters. The situation was both a validation and a frustration. She had achieved fame, but that fame confined her to a narrow identity. When Lucille Ball invited her to join The Lucy Show, Vivian faced a dilemma. Returning to television offered stability, but risked repeating the same supporting role pattern. This time, however, she negotiated her terms. She requested better pay, more flattering wardrobe, and scripts that treated her character with dignity. Lucy resisted initially, concerned about upsetting the familiar balance, but ultimately agreed. On screen, Vivian appeared more confident, stylish, and respected. Audiences responded positively, yet the old hierarchy remained. Lucy was still the central star, and Vivian remained the indispensable support. Even with these improvements, the emotional weight of typecasting persisted, and she eventually chose to step away for her personal peace and health. Throughout her life, Vivian also faced serious health challenges. In the 1970s, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, which she handled privately, sharing only with close friends and family. At a time when illness was rarely discussed openly, especially for public figures, she chose to maintain control over her narrative. She continued working when she could, taking on voice roles, commercials, and smaller projects that allowed her to remain active without overextending herself. As her disease progressed, the physical and emotional toll increased, yet she continued to engage with life on her own terms. Her home life, particularly her marriage to John Dodds, became a sanctuary. Gardening, writing letters, and quietly supporting friends became central parts of her daily life, allowing her to maintain purpose and dignity. Even in her final years, her wit and humor remained intact, illustrating the resilience and grace that had defined her career. With the pressures of television behind them, the power imbalance that had shaped their relationship eased. They were finally able to speak openly without concern for hierarchy, public perception, or professional tension. Their conversations reflected decades of shared experiences, memories of laughter, challenges, and the intense work of creating a show that became a cultural touchstone. Phone calls and visits became cherished moments, allowing them to reflect, laugh, and sometimes cry together. This renewed friendship allowed Vivian to share aspects of her life she had kept private for years. She spoke openly about the sacrifices she made, the personal costs of being a supporting character, and the emotional labor that accompanied fame. Vivian's reflections revealed a woman who had lived with complexity, grace, and awareness. She was not bitter, but she was honest. She acknowledged the difficulties of typecasting, the pressures of the industry, and the emotional challenges of maintaining a public image while privately struggling with depression, loneliness, and illness. She recognized the resilience she had shown throughout her life, the skill she brought to every performance, and the depth of character that allowed her to bring Ethel Mertz to life in ways that resonated for generations. She also acknowledged the personal relationships that shaped her life, including both triumphs and disappointments in love, friendship, and professional collaboration. Her honesty and self-reflection became a final act of courage, demonstrating that even a life in the public eye can be layered, complex, and quietly heroic. Vivian Vance passed away in 1979, leaving behind a legacy that continues to influence television and comedy. Her portrayal of Ethel Mertz remains iconic, a benchmark for comic timing, character work, and the art of supporting roles. Yet beyond the laughs, her life story is a lesson in perseverance, resilience, and dignity. She endured industry pressures, personal struggles, and health challenges, all while maintaining professionalism, humor, and warmth. By sharing her experiences in her final years, she offered audiences and fellow performers insight into the realities behind the glamour. She reminded the world that every performer carries a private story, often far more challenging than what appears on screen. Vivian's life also highlights the complexities of female experience in mid-century Hollywood. She navigated expectations about appearance, hierarchy, and social norms, all while striving for creative fulfillment and personal recognition. Her courage in negotiating roles, asserting her worth, and maintaining dignity in the face of illness and personal hardship demonstrates a strength that is often invisible but essential. For fans of I Love Lucy, understanding Vivian's story adds depth to the laughter, showing that behind the joy she brought to millions, there was a woman of intelligence, heart, and resilience. In the end, her legacy is not only in her performance as Ethel Mertz, but in her bravery, honesty, and the lasting impression she left on television history. Her story continues to inspire, reminding us that the greatest acts of courage are often those lived quietly behind the scenes. Even after Vivian Vance stepped away from the cameras, the impact of her work and the depth of her personal journey continued to resonate. Though millions knew her as Ethel Mertz, the frumpy, loyal, and funny sidekick to Lucy Ricardo, those who understood the woman behind the character knew there was far more to her story. Vivian had devoted her life to her craft, bringing intelligence, timing, and heart to every scene, yet she had done so while managing intense pressures, both professionally and personally. The role that made her famous also confined her in ways that few could see. Casting directors, producers, and the public came to associate her exclusively with Ethel, often overlooking her Broadway credentials, her musical talent, and the dramatic range she had developed over decades. This typecasting was a constant reminder of the sacrifices she had made to succeed in a male and star-driven television industry. Yet, she carried these limitations with grace, professionalism, and subtle defiance. Vivian's later years were a time of reflection and quiet empowerment. She lived in Belvedere, California, with her husband John Dodds, finding the stability and peace that had often eluded her during the hectic pace of Hollywood. There she cultivated a home life that allowed her to be fully herself, free from the wardrobe constraints, makeup rules, and hierarchical pressures of television. She gardened, wrote letters to friends and fans, and maintained a sense of humor that had never faded, even as her body weakened from illness. Her wit and warmth were constants, showing that while the industry may have attempted to control her image, it could never erase her personality, intelligence, or charm. During this time, she also reconnected deeply with Lucille Ball. The complex relationship that had been shaped by power dynamics and hierarchy on set finally found balance. Both women could now converse openly, sharing memories, laughter, and candid reflections about their time together. For Vivian, these conversations offered validation, closure, and the kind of emotional honesty that had been rare throughout her life. Perhaps the most profound element of Vivian's later years was her courage in facing illness. Diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, she chose to maintain privacy, refusing to allow her disease to define her public image. While she endured pain, treatments, and the fear of the unknown, she continued to engage in work she could manage, keeping her mind active and her creative spirit alive. She made deliberate choices about the roles she accepted, ensuring that they honored her dignity and talent, rather than compromising her self-respect. Her management of illness reflected the same careful thought and professionalism that had characterized her career. She remained present, witty, and engaged, showing that strength and resilience were not limited to on-screen performances. Vivian Vance's story offers essential lessons about the complexities of fame, identity, and personal sacrifice. She exemplifies the quiet courage of performers who navigate public adoration while managing private struggles. Her experiences highlight the challenges women faced in mid-20th century Hollywood, where appearance, hierarchy, and conformity were often prioritized over talent, skill, and individuality. Despite these systemic pressures, Vivian consistently asserted her worth, whether through negotiation on The Lucy Show, maintaining her dignity on set, or carefully choosing how she lived her personal life. Her perseverance demonstrates that professionalism, intelligence, and emotional awareness are forms of strength that extend far beyond what audiences see on screen. The legacy of Ethel Mertz is inseparable from Vivian Vance herself, yet it also transcends the character. Ethel is remembered for her loyalty, comedic timing, and heartfelt friendship with Lucy Ricardo, and the magic of their partnership is rooted in Vivian's careful attention to character, her emotional truth, and the subtle tensions she navigated behind the scenes. Every laugh, every reaction, and every subtle expression reflected decades of training, insight, and dedication. Audiences may not have realized the personal sacrifices that made these moments possible, but the depth and nuance Vivian brought to Ethel ensured that the character would endure for generations. Even decades after I Love Lucy first aired, new viewers continued to discover the show, often marveling at the chemistry between Lucy and Ethel, the timing of the jokes, and the warmth of their friendship. Elements made real by Vivian's skill, discipline, and emotional intelligence. Vivian's life also demonstrates the importance of balancing professional ambition with personal well-being. She pursued her craft with intensity, yet she recognized when to step back, choosing privacy and emotional stability over constant visibility. By prioritizing her health, relationships, and self-respect in her later years, she modeled a form of courage that goes beyond performance. It is a quiet courage, often unnoticed, but essential. The courage to define one's own life, even after decades of public scrutiny and typecasting. Her choices remind us that identity is not defined solely by career or public image. It is shaped by values, relationships, and the ways we honor our own truth. Perhaps the most inspiring aspect of Vivian Vance's story is her resilience in maintaining joy and humor despite challenges. Her life was marked by heartbreak, illness, and professional frustration, yet she preserved her ability to laugh, connect with others, and bring happiness to those around her. Whether through letters, visits, or private jokes with Lucille Ball, she demonstrated that humor is a form of strength, capable of sustaining the spirit even in the darkest times. Her ability to integrate work, talent, and personal authenticity provides a model for performers, audiences, and anyone striving to live a meaningful life. In the end, Vivian Vance's story is a testament to the enduring power of artistry, courage, and authenticity. She navigated the challenges of Hollywood, professional rivalry, typecasting, personal struggles, and illness, all while maintaining a commitment to her craft and a deep sense of dignity. Ethel Mertz will forever be remembered as a beloved character, but understanding Vivian's life behind the scenes allows us to appreciate the complexity, intelligence, and heart that made that performance possible. Her honesty in reflecting on her career, relationships, and personal struggles offers insight into the human cost of fame, the resilience required to endure it, and the profound satisfaction that comes from living a life true to oneself. Vivian Vance passed away in 1979, but her legacy continues. New generations of actors, comedians, and audiences discover her work, and through it, the lessons she quietly imparted: professionalism, perseverance, emotional honesty, and the courage to live fully, even under pressure. Her life reminds us that behind every public persona, there is a real person navigating joy, sorrow, and identity, and that true artistry comes not just from talent, but from the strength to persist with heart, dignity, and humanity. Today, when viewers laugh at Ethel Mertz's clever lines, sharp reactions, or heartfelt moments, they are not just enjoying a performance. They are witnessing decades of skill, resilience, and the extraordinary life of Vivian Vance herself.